Hi everybody, my name is Dr. Lee Fitzgerald. Welcome to the Dr. Lee Fitzgerald television show. I have been gone for a while, and I'm going to get really honest with the audience. I was gone because, number one, I lost my sight, macular degeneration. And secondly, my heart started really giving me problems. It started beating faster and faster, and I ended up in the hospital. And then, on top of that, I got cancer. Can you believe that scary word, cancer? And here's me, Dr. Lee Fitzgerald, always doing very positive television shows. I had all of this to deal with. And I had to have 45 cancer treatments for my prostate cancer. And now I'm back. And I feel from my heart that I've really missed all of you. I walk uptown and they say, when are you going to be back on the air? And I am back. And I'm not only back, I have found an angel that saved my life, Mary Joy. She helps people that are really hurting in hospitals. She's a wonderful patient advocate, and I want to introduce her again. How are you doing, Mary Joy?
I'm so glad to be here and share the spotlight here with you today. I feel really honored, and just I'll tell you a little bit about what a patient advocate
Please.
is. I became Lee's patient advocate, helped him get his records, review his records, line up second opinions, we went through thousands of pages of stuff to become knowledgeable about prostate cancer. And this is what I do on an individual basis, but I think the concept of this show is getting out some of this information to the public.
Yeah, because we decided to put mind and body. And the reason I say that is because, let's take my heart, for example. The doctors thought it was a bad heart, a heart that was old, a heart that wasn't working. And no, it wasn't, right? It was a heart that was stressed out,
emotionally stressed.
So that's why we thought of the show, Mind and Body, because everything works together. And so we developed a show that I know will really help a lot of people, especially in these times.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you again for being the co-host.
And I'm glad to be here.
And now we're going to go on. We got a totally exciting show. And I met a gentleman the other day, and I know there's a lot of problems out there. And for all you people that have loved ones that are alcoholic or drug addicts or in prison and on and on and on and on. I met this gentleman that had a real alcohol problem, and he overcame it, and I said, you got to be on the show. And he not only had a mental problem or an alcohol problem, he had some real bad physical problems, which we're going to go into. That's why I want my co-host, Mary Joy, here. But now, thank you for being here. David.
You're welcome, Lee. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Yeah.
Okay, the first question I have for you, what was your life before you went into 12-step recovery? What was it like?
What it was like was completely outrageous and unmanageable. I made a conscious decision as a young man. I'm a child of the 60s.
Ah,
okay?
yeah, me too.
And as such, I fell in love with alcohol and drugs.
Okay.
And I fell in love with it to the extent that I made a conscious decision when I was about a 20-year-old man to get drunk or get high on drugs every single day.
How did that affect your life?
Oh, I really had no life. I mean, drugs and alcohol were paramount. They were number one. Everything else became second. You know, wow. I found there's a line which rings true to me that that normal people, non-drug addicts, non-alcoholics, they change their behaviors to meet their goals. Oh. Alcoholics and drug addicts change their goals to meet their behavior.
You know, we're laughing, but that's not really funny.
It's funny when you think back at it that that's the way that we were. That's not the way that I am now, but that's the way that it was.
So how did you find out about 12-step? How did you get into recovery? I want to go there really quickly because there's a lot of people out there that, especially in these times, that are using alcohol and drugs to self-medicate. How did you find the 12-step?
How I found the 12-step was I was in a marriage, and I've been married multiple times, but it was in a marriage. Goes back to 1996.
Okay.
A lot of years after my continuous drug and alcohol misbehavior, as it will, and addiction. And there was a woman that I was married to who could not tolerate my behavior.
Okay.
I was exhibiting significant drug-seeking behavior, which means that she was out of the house and I was taking things and going to the pawn shops for money.
Yeah.
Anything to get what I needed at the time, as far as to feed my drug addiction. And she couldn't tolerate my behavior, and we didn't have any money or health insurance at the time.
Wow.
So she made some calls, and she found LA County had a treatment center called Warm Springs Treatment Center. Recently, unfortunately, shut down, but that's beside the point. It's up in Castaic, and she said, "You're going there, and I will not take no for an answer." And she drove me up there, and that was my introduction to AA.
Were you there 30 days, 90 days?
I actually stayed there for 90 days.
90 days.
I actually stayed there for 90 days, and I stayed there, and I did not really get the program of recovery. I was up there pretty much for rest and relaxation, to hang around, smoke cigarettes, and swap lies with the guys up there. So it was an old men's facility, and I did not do anything to participate in recovery.
Which is pretty normal. You know, when it takes maybe more than one time through recovery to
I
just
wasn't ready for it. I didn't think that I had a problem. I was, alcoholism and drug addiction are a disease of denial.
Yeah,
I know. We can stand there in the worst behavior in the world on Skid Row and homeless and say we don't have a problem.
And psychologically, the reason for that is you guys, and I'm in recovery too, I'll be open about it. It's all about self-medicating. You start fooling yourself, and the booze really makes everything okay, and then things get really bad.
Correct. Well, besides that, from what I've learned in the 12 steps of recovery, is that alcoholism and drug addiction is a twofold illness.
Okay.
It's an obsession of the mind and an allergy of the body. And Dr. Silkworth in the book Alcoholics Anonymous talks about the allergy of the body being a craving.
Okay.
That's a normal temperate drinker doesn't have. Once I pick up a drink or a drug, I've got to have more.
Yeah.
And then I've got to have more. And then when I'm not doing it, I have an obsession of the mind that tells me that I lie to myself, that I can do it the next time and it'll be different.
So that's amazing, you know, that it's so insidious that's why people die from drug addiction and alcoholism.
Completely, absolutely. Right. That's absolutely correct.
So I have the question of all, how did you finally get it, or when did you get it, that you were a addict alcoholic? How did you finally say, I surrender?
When I left Warm Springs Treatment Center, I left there with the one idea in mind that I learned from there, that you're a drug addict or an alcoholic if you cannot control and enjoy your drinking or using.
Okay.
And that occurred to me, is that all I have to do? And I tried, and I tried, and I tried for 7 years.
7 years.
I was very tenacious.
You don't give up.
I don't give up.
That's why I wanted you on our show.
I'm not a quitter.
Yeah. Amen.
But the point is, I got to the point of what we call complete, pitiful, and incomprehensible demoralization. Okay. I was beaten.
Okay.
I was completely beaten. I was never homeless. I was 1 day away from being homeless.
Wow. 1
day away from being homeless, and I just couldn't do it anymore.
Wow.
And I just could not do it anymore. And I was on my way down to pick up more drugs. And I
want to check this out with the audience. After all this, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I got to get this point across. After all this man was after more drugs. Go ahead.
That's all I knew.
Yeah.
That's all I knew. And I just couldn't do it anymore. And there came a day where I was driving down to pick up my drugs, and I remembered from 7 years before an old AA meeting hall. And for some reason, I went there. And this is the first time in 7 years I actually went there.
Wow.
And I actually parked my car, and I walked in, and they still had a meeting going on.
Wow.
And I don't remember anything about the meeting. I remember sitting in the back trying to hide from people, feeling ashamed, and that they would know. I mean, going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and feeling ashamed of yourself when everyone else is there for the same reason. Sure. But I found a lot of people come in there with that same attitude,
right.
And that same shame, and that same guilt, and that same fear.
Okay.
That same fear. And I don't remember what happened at that meeting, but I picked up a newspaper. It's still around. It's called Steps for Recovery. It's published in the San Fernando Valley, and they have lists of sober living houses in it.
Okay.
And I knew about sober living houses from that prior brief time of sobriety in 1996.
Okay.
And I went back to this motel that I was staying at. It was in the San Fernando Valley, and I went through that paper, and I went to sleep that night. And I got up the next morning. I started making phone calls, and I went and I checked into a sober living house.
My gosh!
And the following day, I went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, the first real meeting, and I completely surrendered. I completely turned my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him. I took the first 3 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, my first day in AA, and I was literally what I call struck sober.
Okay.
Literally struck sober. I have not had a craving or an obsession from that day to this, and I've known a lot of people that fight with that.
That's a miracle.
It's
You
incredible.
know, I feel it in my heart. I totally believe you. And now I want to get to the physical part, you know, and you need to help me with this. You had an amazing, miraculous situation where you got rid of the craving. It was a higher power. Whatever happened, you were free.
Well, if I can just touch on that
Please.
too. There's work to be done. You know, it just doesn't happen miraculously, and then you sit around and you don't do anything.
Okay.
Okay. You don't get recovery and contented in long-term sobriety by what I was called osmosis, by just sitting on your ass.
Okay.
Okay. There's work to be done, and that's the work that's contained within the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. The 12 steps are designed to give the sufferer, the alcoholic or the drug addict, a spiritual experience sufficient to bring about a personality change in order to recover from alcoholism and drug addiction.
Wow.
That's the whole idea about the 12 steps. It's a life-transforming and a life-changing process.
And I want to put in here now for all the people that have friends that are alcoholic addicts, there's also 12-step groups for Al-Anon. And especially in these times when all these places are closing that are treatment facilities, we still, thank you God, have the 12-step AA, NA, Al-Anon, and all the different 12-step groups. But getting back to you. So, you did a lot of work also. You did a lot of reading. Did you get a sponsor right away?
I got a sponsor right away. I started reading and trying to comprehend the book Alcoholics Anonymous and what's contained in it. I got busy.
Okay.
I got very busy. I started moving my feet.
Okay.
And I got action is the magic word.
Okay.
In recovery. I got busy and I started doing the work.
Okay, now.
I started taking the 12 steps and applying them into my life.
So you're on your way. And then all at once, and this kind of scares me to bring this up, because this is why I honor you so much, because you're going to talk about the physical stuff that you have gone through and overcome. You got very sick when you were actually free from drug and alcohol, but then you got really sick.
Right.
And you got, can I say it, tuberculosis? And you were dying, right? You were really back in the hospital. And why didn't you give up and start drinking again? Or what made you, and maybe for a second, you could, if you want to ask him any questions about tuberculosis, because I'm a psychologist, I'm not a medical person, but isn't that a deadly disease?
It doesn't have to be. The kind that David has is one that's hard to diagnose a little bit. He didn't have any of the typical symptoms that you would associate with, you know, the cough and the positive chest x-ray. It was just, his first signs were night sweats and just not feeling right. And it took a while for them to figure out that he had what's called miliary tuberculosis, which is spread to other places. It's not TB of the lungs. It's of the lymph nodes.
Correct.
And so.
But isn't a death sentence if you say are still doing a lot of drugs? Not necessarily.
Not with treatment.
Okay.
And the other thing, tell us what else you found at that time of, you know, you became ill, and what else did they find?
Well, when I became ill, I was about 3 years clean and sober.
Right.
When I became ill, and I wasn't able. I was sleeping too much. I was having night sweats. I had loss of appetite, and I was still not economically secure. I didn't have any health insurance, so I went to a county facility in Los Angeles, and I waited for 5 hours, and I told them my symptoms. They simply, without doing any blood work or checking up, they sent me home.
Yeah.
They just sent me home. They said, you're not sick enough at that point in time for us to even see, which was crazy. But look, this is the type of county facility where you literally wait 5 to 6 hours to be seen.
Yeah, and that's the way it is
That's
now.
how many people there are.
Right.
For the untreated, for the uninsured, for the untreated.
There's a lot of uninsured people out there in our audience.
And it took a while. So I didn't know what was wrong. My symptoms were getting worse. The night sweats were getting worse. I wound up losing 30 pounds.
Wow. Significant weight loss.
Significant weight loss because I couldn't eat. The sight and the smell of food disgusted me. That was just the symptom. And I went to a facility where I was told they have a medical facility, but they'll treat the first 10 people that show up there on a daily basis for free. So I got there at 6 o'clock in the morning. They open their doors at 7, and they start seeing people at 8. And I told them my symptoms. I was not in good shape, and they did blood work. And they told me to come back in about 5 days to go over the results, which I did. And I went back 5 days later, and the doctor was shaking his head, scratching himself, saying, "We can't figure out what's wrong with you. Whatever, I can't find anything wrong. We're going to have to redo the blood work." And for some reason, just out of my gut or out of my head, I asked to be tested, because you can't